a fantastic day. I know that we've got loads of people from around the globe today. Australia, where else? America, I would say Ireland as well. I've been reading some questions this morning. I'm excited to answer some of those. There were loads of questions, so if I don't get to everybody and you feel that something hasn't been answered, you definitely have the opportunity to email any other questions through as well. So welcome again. I'm Lynell. I think most of you would have seen my little video that I did the other day. And who am I? So I've been in the industry for just over 21 years now, been a master colorist for most of them, and been doing quite a bit of education in that time. Not only that, I've looked after and owned a beautiful day spa where I've won Business Achievement of the Year. So putting this together for you is it's a really nice way to help you guys out there and help you nurture any problems that you may have in the salon on a day-to-day basis. But for now, this is a short webinar. I'd love to sit here for a couple of hours with you guys, but we're going to try and condense as much as we can in the next half an hour or so. Okay, so what we're going to endeavour to condense is some really amazing colour basics. Okay, so this is a bit of an excerpt from my Colour 101 presentation that I do in workshops. All right, so let's get started. Okay, so hopefully after doing this little webinar with me, you'll be able to confidently increase your knowledge on the principles of colour. You'll also be able to get hands-on behind the chair and really strengthen your colour selection and your application as well. Okay, what does this do? It's going to help keep and grow your clientele. So bear with me, I am reading from some notes. I do have a little bit of jet lag, so my brain's not as fast as what it usually is. If I have a few ums and ahs, you're going to have to bear with me. But hold on tight and enjoy the ride. Let's go. Okay, so this is what we're going to cover in this short amount of time today. We're going to talk about pigmentation. We're going to talk about the law of colour. We're going to really hone in on exposed contributing pigment. There was quite a few questions that I was reading that had a fair bit to do with that. So hopefully as we go through this, this might answer some of your questions when we get into that. We're going to also talk about depth and tone. We're honing in on those primary and secondary colours. We're going to talk about the ICC numbering system, which is the International Colouring Code. Really have a good, strong talk about activators. And my favourite, the colour wheel. And then after that, look, there were loads of questions, so I've tried to marry up groups of questions that perhaps I can answer all in one go. Okay, so we'll have time for that afterwards. All right, let's get started. So that was about me. I've already told you about me. We'll get past that and get into the good stuff. Okay, let's talk about pigmentation. All right, our natural hair color depends on melanin pigments within the cortex of the hair. There's two main melanin pigments found in the hair, and they blend together in various amounts of proportions to form all of the hair colors that we actually see on a day-to-day basis in our clients' head of hair. So the first one is eumelanin. All right, eumelanin provides black and brown pigments and determines how dark the hair essentially is or will be. Okay, more of this pigment is present in someone's hair, and it gives the overall color in a cool form. So we're talking more of your ashes. So when you're looking at the Naturalique color chart, your ashes would sit in your 0.2s, and your cooler colors are your 1s, or your intensifiers, your 1-1, or your 2-2s. Okay, so the eumelanin pigments consist of all three primary colors, which we will get into a little bit down the line. The next melanin is pheomelanin. This provides our warmer tones. So this provides our reds, our yellows, golds. We don't really see natural coppers, very rarely we might, but this would be predominantly a pheomelanin head of hair. Okay, this will help you to determine how you're going to color people's hair as well. All right. Brown hair honestly, it contains so much eumelanin. Red hair has large qualities of pheomelanin, as I just said, while light blonde hair, it actually contains relatively little or no melanin. Sometimes, especially when you're looking at albino hair, it has no melanin in there at all, and you're dealing with white or perhaps really pale yellow hair. And the pale yellow that we actually see, it's due to the keratin in the hair. Keratin is pale yellow, and that's rather than the pigments. So imagine that the damage is being done when you take it past pale yellow, and I think you know the answer. So I'm talking about when you're lightening hair up to that pale yellow stage and you're exposing that keratin. That's the pigmentation that I'm talking about in there. Okay. And this is a biological fact. It no longer becomes about colour anymore. It becomes a matter of hair health, which is a whole nother topic, and I wish we had time for that today as well, but who knows, we might get there one day. Okay, let's move on to the law of a colour. Okay, I think every colourist needs to know and understand when you lift, you expose warmth. Now, this was actually part of my colour course, so we won't be doing the colour exercise today, but that's just up on the screen anyway. Okay, so as colourists established or upcoming, understand that there is a law of colour. And I've heard it all before, honestly, through doing so much education now, and people that I've taught. I have stylists say to me all the time, Lynell, I need to be hands-on, I need to feel the colour, I need to see the colour, I need to know how the colour performs. But guess what, guys? This is why we learn the laws, and this is why you should get excited, because it's not you finding out about the colour, it's how you drive that colour. Okay? It's like having a Ferrari. You could have the best car in the world, but if you can't drive it, it's a pretty crappy car, isn't it? Okay, so these natural laws apply to everyone. And they're the most simple, and they're honestly the honest truth. A circumstance, it's out of your control because they simply are what they are. They're just there. It happens, okay? When you understand these laws to its ultimate and impeccably, you have control over this outcome, all right? I see it happen all the time. The laws are honestly neglected, and I think we all need to start taking care about how we address colour as a whole. So let's go back to that. When you lift, you expose warmth. Okay? So let's look at this. And this was, we did have quite a few questions about exposed contributing pigments. So hopefully there's some questions, and I haven't answered everybody's question because I knew that we were going to touch on this today in this session. All right, so exposed contributing pigment. So you'll see on the screen in front of you, we have our natural levels 1 through to 10. Okay, we don't have an 11 because 11 has no underlying exposed contributing pigment. We've kind of already reached up and past that pale yellow stage, so there's nothing to expose. All of the melanin has been dissolved and it's out of the hair. So when we look down to our first level, so number 1 is black, and straight through to level 3, our exposed contributing pigment, when we start to lift, what's going to come through is going to be red, okay? And our neutralizing tone is going to be green, okay? So they're on opposite sides of the color wheel, which we'll get to soon. They're our complementary neutralizing tones, right? As we work up and through, we work up another 3 levels, okay? We get into our orange realm, okay? Now, as we move on, the exposed contributing pigment becomes less, and that's when the colors start to turn around, and what you need to neutralize may be more or it may be less, if that makes any sense. So when we hit a level 5, orange, we need to neutralize or complement with blue. Okay, we will neutralize that tone. And then as we move up into the yellows, violet is going to be our neutralizing tones. So I'm sure that makes sense. A really good idea. I have it in my salon. Always have, I ask all the salons that I do training with. This is a really great guide to print out and pop it on your back wall. And if you can't get your hands on one, I'm sure if you emailed head office, they would email it through to you to pop on your back wall. It's a really, really great go-to. Okay. All right, the next thing we're going to talk about is depth and tone. Now, I've just popped a picture here that you can only see the darkness, and I do this for one reason, because depth and tone are two completely different things when you're deciding formulation on hair. Okay, depth dictates how light or how dark the hair actually is. All right, so what we can see in this picture right here is it's in shades of light and grey. All right, so we don't know, we know it's a deeper colour, but we're not aware of what the actual tone is, and that's okay. So my point is, when you have a client that comes into the chair and you're ready to formulate a colour formulation, for the most part we tend to look at our eyes and go, oh, she's red or she's brown and I want to do this and I want to do that, and we mix up where our actual starting point is. So what I want you guys to do, and practice it on anybody, you can do it on yourself, even if your hair's red and you're close to a 5 level or a 6 level, what I want you to do is get your colour chart, and I want you to, actually, can I grab the colour chart here? Probably right behind me. What I want you to do is, instead of going to the actual tone, I would really love you guys to work on using your natural depth indicators here, okay? So all you would need to do, sorry, I'm just holding it on the ground there. All you would need to do, so say, let's take my hair for instance. So would have a combination of a 9 or a 10 in through there. All you need to do is really spread that hair swatch apart, and you really just want to get 2 or 3 little strands in there, and we're looking at the roots or the colour that we're starting with, that we really want to decipher where we're at, okay? And you're just going to pop it in there. If that hair gets lost in there and you can't decide if it is that colour or it's not that colour, that's the exact depth that you're starting with, okay? So it's really nice to always have a pen and paper with you and have your starting point, as opposed to what you think it may or may not be. All right, so that's how we determine depth. Again, depth, not tone. All right. Tone. Now I've put this picture in here following the depth so that we can now see the tone. So beforehand, where we could only see that light and shade, we can now see that she has got really warm shades in there. So we know the tone of the colour that, number one, we either want to enhance, or number two, we either want to neutralise, okay? But that's the decision coming from your standpoint as a stylist, and working in that consultation with your client as to your predicted outcome, okay? And there's my little picture. We love that, okay? Depth and tone work hand in hand together. You can't have one without the other. It just doesn't work that way. All right, let's hit primary and secondary colours. I don't know how you guys address primary and secondary colours, or where it sits for you in the salon, but without these colours, and without the understanding of these colours, we can't get anywhere, okay? So I'm just going to find my notes here for 1 second. If you can bear with me. Okay. All right, so we have 3 primary colours. We have blue, we have red, and my screen is going crazy over here. See the problem with live webinars, people? Oh dear. Bear with me, guys. Make yourself a cup of tea. Okay, so ultimately, we're going to talk about blue, red, and yellow. So there's the three, these guys are the three traits of color, okay? So the color's name is a hue, all right? So when we talk about a hue, that is the color, the blue, the red, the yellow. We add hues of color into other colors, okay? And then the percentage of what the hue is called saturation. So if we were going to talk about saturation, let's take pink for an example. So this would be a very low percentage of red with white to give that saturation. And then there's tone, obviously, that we were talking about with the lightness and the darkness, which we just saw in the slides beforehand. Okay, all colours found in nature are a mix of these three primary colours: blue, red, and yellow. And I'll say it again: blue, red, yellow. Learn your primary colours. Okay, this is what makes up every single colour known in the world except for black and except for white, which are not colours. Okay, when two primary colours are mixed equally, it produces grey. And I think we all know probably from perhaps over experimenting with colours, when we add these three colours together, you probably just answered it yourself in your chair at home, and we get brown, okay? Normally a nice, muddy, lovely looking brown, okay? Now, all of these pigments, every single one of these pigments, blue, red, and yellow, are found in the cortex, but just at varying depths, all right? So primary colours in our hair vary in molecular size. So we're starting to get a little bit scientific here, and they all have a different weight. Okay, and this is really important to understand when you are colouring hair, because this comes into every single thing that you formulate. Everything has a reason, everything has a purpose, nothing's random, it's there for a particular reason. Alrighty? When we talk about blue, blue is a very, very, very strong pigment. It's a bully in a lot of colours, okay? It has the largest molecular size. All right, and it's the heaviest in pigment weight. Okay, so it's then followed by red, and then closely, well, not closely, but a fair bit later, yellow, because yellow is obviously one of our lightest in molecular size and weight as far as pigmentation is concerned. Okay, in the hair shaft, the blue molecules, being the biggest, these guys sit closest to the cuticle, and it's always the easiest pigment to remove. So let's just say, for an example, we've toned my hair and I'm looking a little bit blue. We know we can probably do a few quick volumized shampoos, or perhaps, you know, a really very light bleach bath, and quickly take that blue pigment out because it's sitting so close to the cuticle. It's really on the outside of that cortex. Okay. Where am I at here? So the red molecules then, as we know from looking at the exposed contributing pigment chart, sits deeper into the cortex. So remembering those layers that we need to cut into when we're lifting, all right? So red is there, and then right at the center, we're hit with yellow, okay? So that is, yellow's the hardest one to obviously remove, and that's why we need to go through that lightening process very, very, very gently. Again, that's a whole nother webinar or training session as well. Okay. Okay, so to remove red and yellow pigments, the hair shaft needs to be expanded large enough and for long enough during the colouring to allow oxidation. So oxidation is the process of where the two colours are mixed together. So let's just take, for instance, the yellow. We want to reach yellow. Okay, it needs to happen at a very slow pace. We're not just going to smack that colour on and blast those cuticles open, because all it's going to do is create damage, where we just need to slowly tease those cuticles open and slowly get into the cortex where the oxidation happens. Okay, and this is why it's nice to book your clients in so that you can take your time and charge accordingly for that time. They'll thank you for it later. Okay. This needs to happen very, very, very slowly so that those pigments can dissipate into molecules into the air. Okay, so let's get on to the next one, secondary colours. Okay, so secondary colours are obviously the colours that are then made up from two primary colours. Okay, have a little play. Actually, if anybody's out there who's been to my workshops, hi, and they know that we have a little play with some cups. I like to get nice and physical with my students, I suppose. Set yourself out. I set out 6 cups, so 6 plastic cups, and I half fill them. And then I just have my blue, red, and yellow food colouring in there. So you can go back to the primary colours and really acknowledge how strong these pigments are. You can use your blue, just pop a couple of drops in and see how much you need to get a very intense blue. And then with your red, you can have a look and just keep dropping that red food colouring into the cup until you reach the same intensity as the blue that's sitting beside it. And then same with the yellow. And what I know you will find out, I normally find 1 or 2 drops of the blue food colouring will create a very intense result. I normally find probably 4 to 6 drops of the red food colouring will create that same intensity as the blue. So it's showing me that if I want to do a red colour, I need to add more of the dominating pigment, which is the red, to get that intensity in there. And then with the yellow, I would find you probably need to triple that again. And that just goes to show you, for me, as a colourist, knowing that number one, yellow is a very pale and weak pigment. So it's very easy to neutralise, okay, as opposed to my blues and my reds. So if I wanted to neutralise the blue, because it is very strong, I need to know that I need a very strong pigment to be able to neutralise that effectively, and same with the red as well. Okay, so going back to your secondary colours, once you've done that in your cups, get them and pour a little bit into each. It'll make up your violet, your red and your yellow will go into your orange, and your blue and your yellow will go into your green. Another tip is do this next to natural light. Again, everything becomes optical. So, you know, white light changes, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but changes angles to create different colours, and this is how your primary and your secondary colours are created, and I'll talk a bit about that in a second as well. Okie dokie. So this brings us to our complementary colour wheel. All right, so, and complementary is exactly what it is. So what we're talking about is our 3 primary colours. So we can see red, we have yellow, and we have blue. And sitting directly across from these primary colours are our tertiary colours. Sorry, our secondary colours, and then into our tertiary colours, okay? So where we want to neutralise or complement, you will find that colour directly across the wheel from each other. When you want to enhance something, go to the same side as the wheel that you're on. So for instance, if you've got a red colour and you want a really hot red, you want to see a little bit more, start to move to the right hand side of your colour wheel. Have a look, and we'll look at the NATULIQUE colour wheel shortly. Have a really good look at that colour wheel and see what's going to make it hotter. So you're probably going to enter into your 0.6 realm, whereas if you want that cool red, and knowing too, sorry, just going back to that, knowing that you need more of that red to intensify, you would probably need even more. Don't go crazy if you want it hot, of your red orange based colours. So your 6s or your 5s, something like that in that colour realm. If you want a much cooler red, because there's all different shades of red, you can come back to your left and start to head into your violets or your purples, into your blue, okay? So remembering again, blue is a very, very strong and heavy weighted pigment. So if you want to cool something down, you're only going to need to address it with a small amount rather than the same amount of the red, if that makes any sense, okay? So let's just say, for instance, we we're doing 20 grams of 655 and think, yeah, no, we want to cool that down a little bit, okay? I personally would go in and use my 081 intensifier and probably put 3 grams to 5 grams in and above that mixture to deposit some really cool tonage to get a very beautiful cold red. Okay, so I hope that helps a little bit with your thinking in that regards. Okay, let's talk about the color coding system. NATULIQUE runs by the color code system. It's called the ICC, which is the International Color Code Numbering System. All right, so this is designed specifically for companies pretty much worldwide. Not every single company uses it, but it's based on mostly this. You will have other companies that will just use letters, like you'll have your N's or your NG or, you know, natural gold, whatever, okay? This one makes it very easy to be able to understand where the numbers sit, what they mean, and how to use them, okay? So on the, let me grab that color chart again. So when we're looking at our, just try and get one in here that has 2 shades. Might even use a 1-7 because I know everybody likes everything cold these days. We like cold hair. Okay, so we have got obviously the number to the left-hand side. Don't know my left from my right at the moment. On the left-hand side this is what dictates our depth. So if we want a 5, this is where we're going to. We want a level 5. Okay. Now the first number to the right of the decimal point, this is our dominating pigment or tone. All right, so let's use 517 for an example. Okay, so we have 5. We've got a level 5 or a depth of a 5. Over to the other side of the decimal point, we have the 1. Now, if we look on your screen here right now, obviously your point 1 is blue. All right, so blue being a very strong weighted pigment, a very cold weighted pigment, that's your dominating tone, okay? And then it is just slightly pulled back a little bit with our 0.7, which is a beige, if that makes sense. So you know when you start to marry up these colours or start to really look at these colours and dissect them, which is going to be stronger and which is going to be less dominating, but it's slightly starting to enhance or neutralize these tones within these actual colors. Alrighty, so just to go through those depths, obviously we go all the way through from 1 through to 11, black through to extreme blonde. So our 11s sit in our high lift or our super blonde family, in that range, okay? And then the colours to the right-hand side go from 0, obviously being natural. Our next one is the 0.1, which is blue, 0.2, which is ash blonde, 3, which is our gold, our warmer tones, 4 being mahogany, the 0.5's a red, and your 6 copper, 7 beige, and your 8 is violet. Okay, and then we have our intensifiers, which is our 0.11s, 0.22, a 0.55, the 6.6, and the 8.1. Remembering the 1 in there being blue, and it's on the right-hand side of the 8 for the specific reason that blue, again, is a very dominant pigment, and it only needs a little tiny bit to get a really nice violet in there. So remembering that blue and red make violet, we need a lot more red as opposed to blue to really bring that violet in, okay? And then, can I just have that colour chart for one more second because it hasn't got it on here. And since then, we also have, and I hope you guys have had a chance to play with the pastels and the men's. I'll talk about that in a second. Our pastels are now, they're a semi-transparent colour. So you'd mix these guys with, you know, 1.5% for a bit more of subdued effect, or 3% for a more intense effect. Being semi-transparent, you can't use them as a permanent colour. They are not a permanent colour. They sit just on the outside of the cortex. Okay, they're only just there. So that means they're not going to stay there for long. Now, looking at obviously our blue, this needs to be done on white hair, because if it ends up on yellow hair, just because you haven't mixed the colour doesn't mean it's not going to turn green. Blue and yellow make green, okay? Yellow being a very pale pigment, that needs to be on white hair as well, okay? So we really need to lift up past those pale yellow tones to get that really beautiful, intense shade through there as well. So we do have the men's colour there as well. Now these guys sit in a very cool range, and I think we mix the, I don't think there is a activator that has been made for the men's colours. So at the moment, mixing half 3%, half 6%. These can be left on for about 5 or 6 minutes. You can do this at the base, and these guys sit just in the top of the cortex, so it's not reaching and exposing that underlying exposed pigment, which is fantastic news because men don't particularly like warm hair. So it's in that place where we can just kind of blend those greys in. Okay. So this is what I was talking about before with the ICC numbering system, and I always go to that 517 because it shows those strong pigments. So we spoke about the depth and the level being the 5, the 1 being the first number past the decimal point being our prominent and dominant tone, and the 7 being our secondary tone. So obviously not as much pigment being deposited into that colour. Okay. Sorry, this one's a bit blurry, but we're going to talk about the activators and where it sits and how it penetrates the hair. Okay. I am a percentage girl. I always like saying percents. It's just how I've learnt, but I will say volume as well. Let's start with 1.5% or 5 volume. Okay. This will give a subtle effect on the hair. And I was talking before to some of my classes that I've done. I do a really great blonde mastery colour and helping people to understand how to create beautiful blondes. And I do something that's called a base breaker. What's a base breaker, you say? Well, what I like to use it as, and I use it on myself too when I get a bit lazy and I don't want to do my regrowth, every week or so I will just use 1.5%. I'll mix it with 10.8 because I'm just wanting to break that base slightly and add some really nice cold tone into it, like at 0.22 or something like that. And I use that at a 1-to-1 ratio, pop it on my regrowth 30 minutes, and it's just changed that tone. So just to let you know, myself, I am a natural level of a 6. So I am, believe it or not, I'm not a natural blonde, but I am quite dark naturally. But I'm only telling you guys, don't tell anybody else. So knowing that I'm having to still neutralize that tone slightly, and that is why I'm putting my 0.22 in there, because that's my green, okay, in there, and I'm wanting to neutralize any warmth that comes through. I'm not particularly, 1.5, don't get me wrong, it will expose some warmth, but it definitely will not dive into that cortex and show all of that, you know, the underlying exposed pigment of a red or an orange or anything like that. Okay, it won't even touch that area at all. Okay, then we have our 3% activator. So you can definitely use, or a volume of 10, sorry, you can most definitely use that as a permanent color. You can use it as semi-permanent. For me, I use it predominantly on my colder colors. So for those areas that I don't want to dive in and expose that warmth, 3% is only just going to tickle the outside of that cortex. So let's just say I was, again, we'll say a 6, because we're all shooting for a cold 7 level or a cold 6 level, okay? But I think way too many times people are diving straight in and going straight for a 6%, and we're ultimately lifting and exposing that warmth, which is kind of doubling up on what you really need to do. So I'll use my 3% if I'm on that same level or I want to create a half a shade difference. 3% with, like if I was on a 6, I would use a 617 or a 717 with 3% and perhaps a little bit more of my 011 over and above my mixture because I'm wanting to deposit more tone. Just one thing about activators. The more you mix in your formulation, the higher lift or the more warmth you're going to achieve, okay? The more colour you deposit, the more tone you're going to achieve. So this is why when I want to see something that's quite cold, you know, and I don't want to see that glimmer of warmth at all, I'll put in over and above my 1-to-1 ratio. So if I had 20 grams of 3%, 20 grams of 617 together, I would put in an extra 5 grams of 011 or 022 depending on what tonal value I'm really trying to deposit. Okay, so what's happening in that connection there is you've got 3% and your 617 neutralizing that slight underlying pigment that's going to expose through, and then you're really using your intensifiers to neutralize and really deposit and pack that pigment. And again, remembering that your 1-1 being blue is a very heavy pigment, so it will really densify that color. That might answer a few of your questions that I read this morning, this afternoon. Okay, so 6%. Oh, back to 3%. Sorry, no, you cannot cover grey hair with 3%, okay? It doesn't have the ability to really get in and fill out that grey area, all right? But it definitely will give you a permanent result. And again, I like to use it for my chocolate colours and things like that too. So get a really nice colour result. 6%, okay? It will cover grey, okay? It's the only activator that you would use to cover grey because we really need to get in there and fill out that hair shaft, all right? It will also lighten 1 to 1.5 shades, no problem at all, and it is definitely a permanent activator, all right? Just to quickly, this isn't a grey hair webinar, but I do want to give you my little tips on covering grey hair. We have grey hair that's sometimes very, very hard to colour, and that's what I would call resistant hair. So that's hair that no matter what colour you put on, it'll always look transparent. It'll always have that bit of a glimmer of transparency. So what I would normally do there is use the base colour, or if we wanted a, let's go back to our colour chart. If we wanted, if we were shooting for a 6 level, let's keep it easy. Or no, let's complicate a little bit. Let's go, just say we wanted a target shade of a 607, which is really beautiful, by the way. And we had very resistant hair. Let's just say around the front hair we were nearly 100% white. I would go in and pre-pigment, and I would probably go in over the top of that and do a resistant mix. So pre-pigmenting is, there's a couple of different ways you can do it, but the easiest way is just the natural base by itself in a bowl, whisk it up, get a little bit of air in there so it starts to wanting to open the cuticle, and what you're doing is pre-softening the cuticle. So all you're doing is trying to create a gateway for the end result, okay? So that being said, you would lightly pop it on where you need to pre-soften that cuticle, and then you would go in with your target shade. Now, if you're obviously covering grey hair, these guys need to mix. You are going to have to put base into it, which I would use half of my 60 to half of my target shade, being 607. So again, let's work on a formulation of 20 grams of 60, 20 grams of 607, and then I would create a resistant mix. So you would use 20, 20, 40 of 6%, and then I would put another 5 grams of my 60 over and above, and that's creating a resistant mix. Going back to what I just said before, when you want to deposit colour, when you want coverage or amazing tonal value, you need to put more colour than developer. It is as simple as that. And you can use it in fashion colouring as well. Okay, I do it with my reds and my coppers all the time. And I'm just about to get to that. So we go on to 9%. So 9%'s a tricky realm for a lot of people. I am a colorist who, and I specialise in blonde colouring, and I would say to anybody, never, ever, 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 ever use anything more than 6% with your lightening powder, ever. 9%'s main goal is to quickly work to open up that cuticle, dive into the cortex and expose warmth. And guess what? It stops. It stops right there, okay? When you're doing a bleaching process, it needs a long, long amount, like I was saying before, that time to oxidize. And it's the exact reason why bleach or the whitening powder has, you can leave it on for up to an hour. Absolutely use that time, all right? So 9% you would definitely use to lighten 2 to 3 tones. I use my 9% predominantly with, if I'm wanting to achieve a beautiful caramel colour, from a 5 level up to a 7, between 7 and an 8. Okay, when I'm wanting vibrant reds or coppers, I want to dive right into that, nearly that middle part, just outside of the middle part of the cortex, to expose that contributing pigment there. All right. So you're exposing either your reds or your oranges, and then you're enhancing it with your target shades. Okay. And then we go on to 12%, 40 volume. Obviously, you would not use this with a whitener, or I'm coming to smack every single one of your hands. So you would use this with your high lift tints, and it can and will lighten up to 4 tones. It does on mine. I'm a high lift, and I do it every 4 weeks, okay? So done in the right way, you can definitely achieve what you need to achieve. Hope that explains activators. You can always email me some other questions if need be. The colour wheel. Okay, I'm going to have a really good talk about the colour wheel. I do have a little bit of writing here, guys, so bear with me. All right, so I think for myself, I can speak for a lot of successful colorists. This is something that it should just be made a law by itself. It should just be on every salon's wall, every single salon. It's something that you need to connect with on a daily basis, and it's there for a reason, all right? So for me, I think the colour wheel, we'll go into the history of it in a minute, it's amazingly thought out, and it's my Bible. It's what I go to sleep thinking about. I know, what a boring life, right? So it's been around for centuries. So here's a little bit of history in a minute. It's there for our optical understanding, and I use the word optics because this is what we see. We're artists who see every single colour. Okay, it's why we do the job that we love. So let's really understand it well. All right. Okay. Let me have a look here. Not only I think you should really spend time memorising the colour wheel. I think you also need to have that full understanding of the colour wheel. And just to reiterate, it's definitely the most perfectly arranged tool that can contrast or it can neutralise absolutely anything. And like I said before, it is as simple as whatever you need to neutralise or complement, it's either right beside each other or directly across from one another. All right, so bear with me. I just want to get back up to the top here. Hope you guys are good. I hope you've had a good couple of cups of teas in there. Okay. All right, so a little bit of history. I wonder if anybody out there knows how the colour wheel did come about. Okay. Just for our modern understanding of it, this wasn't just something that just appeared in every colour book. It's there for a reason. We don't just use it. Artists use it. Painters use it. Anybody with kids out there, I'm sure their primary school teachers teach their children, teach your children with it every single day. I know my kids, my God, my daughter's drawing colour wheels all the time. She's going to overtake me anytime soon. I can see it right now. Okay, so guess what? It started a long, long, long time ago. So it began with a lovely man called Sir Isaac Newton. So he was a huge scientific figure. He was a mathematician. He was a physicist. So just those words combined should tell you that you guys are hair scientists. This is based on science, not just any science. It's an exact science. Okay, so it's not just, I like that colour, I can throw that together and we're going to end up with that. It is an exact science that requires exact formulations. Okay, so get familiar with it. Okay, so he published a series of experiments in 1672 and he was, don't get me wrong, a couple of other people did dabble in it, but he was the first documented person to actually understand the rainbow, and he refracted white within prisms. I'm getting deep here, I know. So this resolved into component colours such as your red, your orange, your yellow, green, blues, and your violets. Okay. Just a quick explanation on refraction. So what happens is when light refracts, it travels at an angle, and it changes directions, and it gives different alternate colour results to our optical vision. So let's take, for instance, I go back to red because it's probably the biggest one that we can assimilate with. So when you have a red head that stands out in the sun and it becomes brighter because the natural white light starts hitting it and it starts to break up those colours, to our eyes, it appears a lot brighter. Okay. Okay, so in the late 1660s, Newton began experimenting with this celebrated phenomenon of colours. And at this time, it was thought that the colour, before all of this was properly documented, it was thought that the colours were simply made up of light and darkness, and that prisms were light as well, okay? But they were really ill thought out theories, and at the time, Newton not only realised, but he also proved that it was false. So lucky us, we ended up with the colour wheel, okay? So this was in the Renaissance era, where you had painters like Michelangelo and Rembrandt. They started recognising his findings and using that colour wheel to the best of their ability. And look at the outcomes these guys have had. Pretty amazing outcomes in history. So this nearly brings us to the end of what we're doing here now. I want you guys to take that time and look at your colour wheel and understand, just looking at it here now, and after talking about primary colours, the depth of pigment, the weight of pigment, you'll be able to assimilate with that and connect with it on a deeper level, I feel. Maybe I've got a strange relationship with the colour wheel. I don't know. I love it. I need it in every single day. And all of those numbers sit in the exact proportion that they should be sitting on. Again, so if you go back to the ICC chart, okay, International Colouring Code chart, you'll be able to see where all of these sit proportionally around the wheel, and questions of why is that there, mixing those colours together, you'll be able to get a really, really great understanding of that. Okay? Questions? All right, let's have a look. So again, there were a lot of questions, and I know you guys probably got other things to do in your life today, so I won't or can't answer every single one of them, but if you feel like I've missed something, please email me or email head office, and we'll absolutely endeavour to get back to you as soon as possible. All right, so Liz, okay, so your question was, any tricks to fade only a week after a colour being done? So this is a tricky one to answer, because number one, I would want to know what the texture of the hair was, the porosity of the hair, what activator was being used, and perhaps if there's a client that you are relating to specifically after talking about activators and pigmentation, you might be able to answer that yourself. So it also comes down to, there's a lot of other things why colour doesn't take. Medications can be a big contributor. Products that are being used in the hair. So this comes down to consultation with your client. Really ask what they're using at home. Make sure you give them excellent prescriptions for them to take home. So I'm talking about sitting down and talking about their lifestyle. Is she swimming every day? You know, what styling tools is she using? Is her straightener too hot? Straighteners can definitely pull tone out of the hair for sure. So that's pretty much, that's a very rounded answer, I know, but it's probably the best that I can give you on the information of that question. Okay. Brittany, tips on fighting warmth. Well, I think we probably spent the last, 40 minutes or so covering that. Getting to the colour wheel. So have a look and see if you've got red being one of our warmest colours straight across. Have a look at your neutralising or complementary colour that's going to help even that out. Okay, so again, I think we've probably gone over a lot of that today, and hopefully some of that has answered your questions. If not, again, shoot me an email. Colourworks Hair Studio. What is the best toner for a creamy neutral blonde, not too ashy? I love plain 11O. It's a very forgiving colour. You don't need to add anything to it. On my days where I'm feeling a little bit pale and yellow, I will just throw it on. I do just watch for your porosity on your blondes though. If you're very, very porous, mix it at a 1:2 ratio, and that will just help to even out your porosity. For me, I like mixing all my toners at a 1:1 ratio. Okay, and I feel like I get a really beautiful shiny coverage. These colours are gorgeous. Like, you treat the hair with respect and you'll get respect in return. Absolutely beautiful. But 11O all the way, absolutely gorgeous. And I do leave my toners on for half an hour, people. So when people are scared of leaving toners on for very long, and it comes down to one simple fact. They haven't looked at their colour wheel properly and deciphered the exact formulation of what they need. So if you pick your right formulation, there's never a need for any guesswork at all. You'll always get the result you always want. Stuart, how to properly colour over previously lightened hair, advice on pre-pig or filling. This goes back to being pretty old school, really. Always, obviously with pre-lightened hair, we're talking about enhancing exposed contributing pigment. When we're wanting to colour back, we need to deposit the contributing pigment that we no longer want to expose, but we want to put it in there so we can give it a beautiful coverage. So if you were going from a very light blonde, have a look at your target shade, okay? So if it's on an 8 level or a 9 level, you want to make sure you use your 3 family. So you want to put back in your gold, okay? So you can go straight in. I think years ago we used to just have just the pigment to put in. I know I did when I did my apprenticeship 20-something years ago, but you can most definitely, where's my 3s here? Told you it's been a long couple of days. If you're wanting, let's just say for instance sake, you were very, very light and you're wanting an 8 level, I always do a first application with 1 shade lighter, okay? Very porous hair, when it's always light, it is porous and it can be unpredictable, and that's just because of its ability to absorb moisture or hold on to moisture, and sometimes when the hair's lacking moisture, it will grab anything it possibly can. So that's why I will always start with 1 shade lighter. Okay, so I would do this first, wash off, dry off, and then apply my target shade. Okay. And also coming into consultation with your client, make sure that they do realise when you do colour back, they're prone to fadage. So you really need to dominate that with follow-up appointments and making sure that you create a really good regime for them as well. Alison, without any double pigment colours, 00 and how do you achieve full grey coverage on resistant greys without using additive? My God, that's an awesome question, and I think I answered that in the webinar that we just did now, talking about full grey coverage. It is a problem, and I would say once you conquer full grey coverage, I think probably 70% of clientele will have problems with grey hairs, and once you conquer that, it's one of your biggest money makers as well. So just go through process of elimination. You want to check and see if it's resistant, do a porosity test, check and see how thick the texture of the hair is. If the cuticle needs to be softened, go in and pre-pigment. If you feel it's not overly resistant, then go in and just do your resistant mix, and you'll get a really beautiful blanket coverage. I only pre-soften, when I see that little bit of translucency if my resistant mix hasn't quite covered sufficiently. Hope that answers your question. Georgiana, what is the best combination for the really strong, silvery strong blondes? Do you know what? My Lord, just go straight for your intensifiers. I use 022 and 011 by themselves a lot. So grey and silver hair is still very much in fashion. And I use it a lot in my root stretching. So once I've gotten up to the level that is not going to create anything muddy if I'm going to add that into it. So when we're using these colours, we need a very, very, very clean palette. So we need to get up past that pale yellow stage so we can just deposit the tone that we want to deposit. So while we use that, we still need to prepare a canvas for it, if that makes any sense. So that at a 1-to-1 with your 1.5% or your 3% is totally fine, depending on the porosity of your hair. I would normally always go with your 1.5. You'll get a stronger deposit of colour on that. What we got? Elizabeth, how to get the most lift out of the high lift blondes? I love high lifting, and once you can master it, blondes are your oyster. It's amazing. Again, I skip the main. I very rarely ever use 11 or 11.2 as my super blondes. Believe it or not, I go straight for my 022 and 12%, because what I'm doing is I'm just lifting and I'm depositing. A trick with colouring blonde hair and getting it to a really beautiful creamy stage, because obviously when you're high lifting you will show that warmth, especially from a 6 level. So I will use my 022 and 12% at a 1-to-1 ratio, remembering what I was talking about before. When you add more activator, you expose more warmth. When you add more colour, you deposit more tone. All right, so when I'm on a 6 level, I don't particularly want to be a 10 or an 11 or anything like that. I just want a really nice soft blonde. So by doing my 022 and my 12% at that 1-to-1 ratio, I'm lifting up to about a 9 level. If I've got any warmth, I will then go in and neutralise, because I'm up on that, that yellow range. I will go in and neutralise with a 10.8 and 3% and push it that extra half a shade further. All right, so you just got some of my Blonde Mastery course in that one. And that would have been left on for another half an hour after that as well. Okay, Sandra, grey coverage and lift with bleach on coloured hair. All right, so this is a good one. I don't bleach grey hair, and I'll tell you why. Because right at the centre of your cortex is, well, the cortex is made up of keratin, and keratin is essentially yellow, okay? So once you have grey hair, and I'm talking more on that 100% grey hair. If you've got 50-50, by all means, go ahead and pop some foils in, or if you want to lighten a little bit. But if you're talking about that already 100% white or grey hair, you're already there. So you may as well just foil that colour out and put a little bit of conditioner or treatment on it in a foil and keep that already as your colour. And then we've already gone through the grey coverage, and then you can create a resistant mix in and around what you've already started with. So I hope that makes sense. But you'll find more often than not, and this may not even be part of the question, but more often than not with really white hair, I'll have a salon call me and say, oh, Lynell, I've bleached Mary's hair and it's really yellow very quickly. And that's because you've exposed the colour of the keratin, and it's as simple as that. Okay. All right, Stephen, my favourite mixture. I'd have to say, honestly, for my high lift blonde, like using 022 and 12%, definitely, and pushing it that little bit further. That and I love my redhead clients. They're amazing. That and 6.55 with 9% because I want to reach into that really red part of the exposed contributing pigment. And then I will add an extra 5 grams or 10 grams of 055 on top of that, and that's how you get that beautiful, intense, rich red, and it stays. It's stunning. Abby, can you use 10 volt to cover grey hair? Well, we answered that in the activator, so definitely no. However, you can most definitely use 10 volt or 3% on grey hair, just for that really nice semi-transparent look. Some grey-haired ladies don't like a full blanket coverage anyway, but definitely if you want a blanket coverage, 6% all the way. Struggling with toners. So I think getting to that relationship with your colour wheel, be very honest about what colour you're starting with. So if you are on an 8 level, you tone with an 8 level. If you're on a 9 level, you tone with a 9. If you're on a 10, you tone with a 10. Okay? Go to your colour wheel. Find out exactly what you're starting with. What's the depth? What's the tone? What do I need to neutralise it with? Okay? And if you're just neutralising it, you use that complementary colour. If you're wanting to add tone to it, then you can add in an ash or your ice blue or something like that, so that you can really kind of tweak your toners up a little bit. And Megan, what's your favourite toner? I already said that one. Had a few of those ones actually. So yeah, definitely 11O. I live on the Gold Coast, and the blondes there like to be nice and crisp but creamy. Okay, so that's my go-to. It's probably one of the biggest colours I do my ordering for. Pooja, I hope that's how you pronounce your name. How we do an iced chocolate colour. Okay, so again, all of these questions in your colour wheel. So remembering I was saying that your complementary colours, again, are directly opposite each other. Your enhancing colours are right beside each other. Okay, so if I'm in my, I would say your chocolate would sit around your 5 or your 6 level, which I would probably look towards my 7. Sorry, I'm having a dance with the colour chart here. So if I was at my 6, 7, 7 and I wanted to make a really nice, cool chocolate, I would definitely look at putting a small proportion of my 6, 8 in there as well. Okay. So it just cools that down, but remembering strong pigments, small amount of colour adding into your chocolate. All right, you'll get a really gorgeous tone with that. Okay, big question here. Okay, I have a question. I want to understand the logic behind the assigned numbers to the colours level/tone. On the colour wheel, they seem to have no mathematical pattern, do they? I'm going to disagree. I think they do. It's not about the maths again. So once we're going through this, will probably help you understand a little bit more on why those colours. It's not about 1, 2, 3, 4. It's about the tone behind those colours, and they sit perfectly within the realm. All right. Okay, so I hope that's explained, and probably as you were watching, you went, that's why. That's why. So it's not about maths, it's about the scientific realm behind all of that. That's where it stands. Olga, okay, I mixed 40 grams of 11.2 with 4 grams of 8188 mils of 40 vol. The colour result was really nice, soft blonde pink. I have a photo. And after 6 to 8 hours, the pink went away without washing it. I'd like to know the reason. That is it's a very strange result, because the only thing, and I was having a chat to one of the other educators before with NATULIQUE. She was saying you actually had a chat with her. The only thing, without seeing the hair and knowing what she uses or the environment that she's in, number one, we're looking at 8, which is violet. Violets live very close to the outside of the hair, but what kind of stumps me is without washing it. The only thing I can think of is, and I'd love to, maybe have a chat through email, find out about this client a little bit more, without washing it, would be perhaps styling. Is she in the hot sun? Heat can change colour results hugely, absolutely hugely. Is she using straighteners? The heat will pull tone out with straighteners for sure. So by all means, I might get in touch with you and maybe see if we can nut that one out, because that's a good one. Stumped me on that one. And I'd like to see the photo, yeah. And Ellie, best toners to get a clean blonde. Again, my 11.0. In saying that too, when we want that bright, clean blonde, I will also go in and do perhaps a little whitening shampoo. So I'll mix 50 grams of whitener together, 50 grams of 1.5 or 3%, depending on the porosity of the hair, 50 mils of lukewarm water, and 3 pumps of volume shampoo, and give them a really, really nice shampoo with that in the basin beforehand. Dry it off so that my cuticles are really, obviously wash that off, dry it off, and then pop my 11.0. So I'm taking away any built-up tonage there at all, okay, and starting from something clean. Okay, how do I make blondes brighter but still ashy? I've been using 817 and 92. Just gone back to using, which I never thought I would, because I can't get that perfect bright ashy blonde. You could probably use that question prior to this one as a little bit of a guide. Clean that blonde out first and go in with your tone on tone. So if you're at a 10 level, tone with a 10. But for me, bright and ashy don't sit, if I'm going to be honest, don't sit in the same sentence. For me, bright, I look at clean white blondes, where ashy starts to dullen that tone down. So perhaps even if you want to, so we can get on the same visual wavelength, send me a photo of your target shade that you'd like to achieve and what you're starting with. I can most definitely help you out with that one. And Christina, filling hair prior to a tint back. So we answered that one before. So we have got a few of the same ones there. So you would just fill back in there with the pigment that you need to put back in. Rachel, what are the best NATULIQUE formulas used to achieve natural ash blonde levels of an either 7 or 8 when doing a tint back from bleached blonde? Client is highlighter blonde, wants to go back to natural ash blonde colour to match her roots. Okay, that's a really good one, and it happens all the time. You absolutely do need to get back to that same base level. So if you're wanting to get back to your 7 or 8 level from being quite bleached, you first need to slightly fill. So you can go back and fill it with a 7 or an 8, depending. It's probably very porous, so it will grab onto that colour very quickly, and you'll need to add a tiny bit of warmth into that. So something that has a 0.3 in there. It will be a double application though. Nothing is a one-stop shop when you're dealing with colour correction. And then you can most definitely, once you've got that really nice canvas, you may actually like that colour, because once you're filling back, it does tend to look a little bit flatter anyway, or a bit colder, but then you can definitely go back in with your 0.2 or your 1/7 over on top of that, okay? Just make sure you've got that colour at a really nice, it needs to have a little bit of a warm stage, otherwise you'll end up quite flat with that. Caitlin, how can you use the pastel colours and mixes to make the natural and zeros more enhanced? Okay, pretty much the pastels are not made to be mixed with your natural range, okay? So the pastels, because they are quite semi-transparent, they don't have deep pigment in there, so it's not going to turn out to be the result that you want, but you most definitely you know, can use your other fashion colors in there to enhance things as well. Last question. What did you find most different when you made the change to NATULIQUE? Is the color wheel similar to the other? I did not find anything, and they haven't paid me to say this, I did not find anything difficult about changing to NATULIQUE, and it's for one simple reason. I know and I understand my color basics. The color wheel is the color wheel, it always will be, and their colors sit in that color wheel perfectly where they need to be. So hopefully after today, you guys will maybe have a little bit more of a different appreciation, hopefully a love for it, and you'll be able to answer all of these questions. But for now, we probably rambled on long enough.
Yeah. Let's see. We have to skip the last couple of questions. Sorry. But I'm hijacking the screen for a couple of seconds. Sorry about that. I know you want to hear technical stuff, but I want to share this with you. This year, for October month, to get some awareness about breast cancer, we have joined up with Breast Cancer Now. It's a UK foundation, and their campaign, Wear It Pink. So throughout October, we will hair it pink. So from October 1st, starting to October 20th, we'll donate €1 per like with this hashtag. This means if you post anything pink or pinkish hair art on Instagram, we will repost this and we will donate €1 per like. So remember to hashtag NATULIQUE, hashtag hair it pink. If you do anything red, pink, and that sort, we'll repost it and we'll start donating to breast cancer awareness and to get some more awareness out there on breast cancer. So I hope you enjoyed the webinar, and sorry for hijacking here in the end. That's it, folks.
See you later. Thanks.